Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 52 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I got a really exciting email this morning that the Power Company Process Journal has shipped and is on its way. So as soon as I have that thing in my grubby little hands, you guys are going to hear more about it. It's a 3-month mindfulness journal for your climbing sessions, both training or climbing. And just asks really focused questions before and after your session so that you're able to help out your next session and look back and realize where things are going wrong, where things are going right, and be able to either change those things or repeat those things. So we're really excited about it. You'll be hearing more soon. As I told you guys last time, the Midwest Training for Climbing Conference has been canceled. Nate and I, however, are filling those dates up in Missouri. So if you happen to be in Missouri, look for us mid to end of August, and we will be at Rock in Kansas City on August 13th and 14th. We will be at Climb So Ill in St. Louis August 15th and 16th, and we hope to see all of you guys at Climb So Ill that we've gotten to know so well. We'll be at Zenith Climbing Center August 18th and 19th, and that's in Springfield, Missouri. We're really excited to check out that gym. Haven't met those guys yet, but really looking forward to it. And then back to Rock, Kansas City on the 20th and 21st, where we're really excited to meet their community as well. Sounds like those guys have got a really tight community over there. We're stoked for that. And we'll also be at Asana in Boise, Idaho, August 25th, 26th, and 27th. So we hope to see all of you out there who are in the Missouri or the Boise area. Please come out and check us out. We've got a bunch of new workshops that we're working on, including our new body tension workshop. So hope to see you there. Since we've reached our goal on Apple Podcasts of 100 reviews, I've been kind of trying to figure out what the next goal should be. And our Facebook page, the Power Company business page, I think is a good goal. We'd like to see 3,000 people on there. We're at around 2,700, something like that right now. And we'd love to see you guys over there. Once we get to 3,000, we're going to start sort of changing up the way we run that page over there and make it something entirely different from the Instagram and just posts about the podcast and blog posts and things like that. So we'll be giving you guys some new information over there once we reach that 3,000. So please find us on Facebook at Power Company Climbing. Okay, I'm going to get on with this thing. I've got a really great conversation today with Allison Stowers. She is a PT in Chattanooga. She practices at Peak Fitness and Physical Therapy. And if you guys are in the Chatty area, you should definitely go check out Peak Fitness because they've put on some great free workshops for climbers and are putting really great information out there. And I really appreciate that about what they're doing. And part of this whole thing that I'm trying to build here is based around building a better community, and for me that means reaching out to you guys, getting to know you guys, but also reaching out to other professionals and other practitioners and building this network. And I really appreciate that they're trying to do the same thing. And Allison has been a Power Company client. Paul sends people over to Allison who need physical therapy. So I really just like having this great network, and Allison and Peak Fitness and PT are definitely important parts of that network. So I'm going to let Allison take this thing away.
Well, and I think that's really important too, is empowering climbers to be able to fix themselves. What I always tell people is, like, I would love to see you again, but not here. I want to see you out at the crag. I want to see you at the gym, you know?
Power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
You're looking at laughter. I'm like, I like you, but you're crazy. Well, not many people argue that. I guess before we do anything, we should probably thank Charlie and Josh for letting us sit in their little egg and talk here.
Yes.
So,
I think at one point, no, their old trailer was called Beulah. I'm not sure what this one's name is.
You don't know this one's name?
Not yet.
It's awfully cute.
I think we've been calling it Foulcore.
Foulcore. I like it.
Because their name's the Fowlers.
Yeah.
So.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, even if that's not the name, that's what they're calling it.
That's what they're calling it from now on.
Whether they know it or not. Yeah. So, Allison, tell me, how'd you get into PT? You mentioned today that you were living in London doing economics, right?
Well, I was in London for a summer, and that was during undergrad. And my whole plan, I was working for a while. My whole plan was to go back to school, get my PhD in econ, and go back to London to work and
as an economist.
How'd
that switch over to PT?
So while I was working, I had actually taken up running and a little bit of climbing and stuff, and I was just having all these injuries and just like little things. And at one point, I had to pay almost $3,000 for an MRI.
Ouch.
And then I ended up getting recommended for PT.
Right.
6 weeks later, I was fine, and it was like...
Right. You're like, why did I just spend $3,000?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that whole direct access thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to... That was really interesting to me, and I really wanted to bring that to other people. And
keep people out of that same situation.
And then climbing became more and more important. So,
which seems to wreck many, many lives.
Yeah.
So.
And save some.
Yeah, for sure. Most definitely. So you moved back to the States. Did you go right to Chattanooga?
No. And I was actually only in London for a short time, just that summer. And then I was living in Atlanta at the time. So I grew up south of Atlanta and went to school in Atlanta, was working there. And then we just moved to Chattanooga about 2 years ago.
Okay.
For climbing.
For climbing.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah. And as a PT, I always knew that I wanted to work with climbers. And so if I want to work with climbers, I need to go where the climbers are. So we moved to Chattanooga so that I could do PT for climbers.
Was it, just out of curiosity, was it slow to catch on with climbers?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of wrecked folks out there who are wanting information and wanting to get better and wanting to prevent injuries. So pretty soon after I moved, I reached out to some of the local climbers and was like, hey, would any of you guys be interested in a workshop? And it was like overwhelming, the number of people who responded.
Yeah, cool. I remember when those happened. I remember seeing it on Facebook, on Paul's page, and Nate talked about it. Is that when you first met Allison?
I don't know when we first met.
Maybe.
It was definitely, I feel like it was definitely before that. But yeah, they were awesome. It was really cool to see like free clinics putting out good information. Like, yeah, you can't really ask for much better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool that there was such a good response to it. I feel like a lot of climbers have this like, I'm just going to fix myself attitude. So it's cool that you've got some traction there in that community.
Well, and I think that's really important too, is like empowering climbers to be able to fix themselves. Because like, you know, what I always tell people is like, I would love to see you again, but not here. Like, I want to see you out at the crag. I want to see you at the gym.
Cool.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's a good and noble way to take it.
Yeah.
And you said today that the injuries you see most often with climbers are shoulders and hip area, right?
I see shoulder and hip. The research does not like show any of that, but
and I was thinking about that, about the hip thing, and I was, maybe it's a southeastern thing, because a lot of the sport climbs there are really a lot of the roofy stuff with the tiered roofs and a
lot of heel toe cams, very
cams.
leg dominant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is a lot of the research about heel hooking in particular has to do with, it'll compare climbing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
those are heel hooks of sorts?
Yeah. So and it's like they actually call the move heel hooking. Sorry to anyone who does Jiu-Jitsu, but like, I don't know anything about it. But apparently there is a move called a heel hook, and it's very similar to a climbing heel hook.
Really?
And the injuries end up being very similar. And then
this is why Paul Corsaro is so good at compression. Yeah, he heel hooks while he's doing jiu-jitsu as well.
So it tends to be in those injuries that it's you would tear an ACL and an LCL, MCL, ACL, and medial meniscus.
Yep.
And while I think that happens sometimes with climbers, most of the climbers that I see who have injuries from heel hooks, it's from a high hamstring strain.
Okay.
Which is much easier to fix.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. Well, let's talk about some of that then, and then maybe we can dive into shoulders a little bit later. You mentioned something about first off, what can climbers do to prevent those kind of injuries from happening? Should we be warming up better? Are there stretches? What is it we should be doing?
So the biggest thing is doing some sort of dynamic warm-up.
Okay.
And when I say dynamic, I mean basically just big move type stretches. So if, high knees, marching, I call them hip openers. So you'd be standing up and you'd basically bring your knee up and bent in a flex position in front of you and then bring it out wide.
I've been doing that for the last bunch of days because of my adductor strain.
Yes.
And people look at me so strange up at the boulders when I'm walking around like that. So I'm glad you just said that.
No, and I always
I don't feel so ridiculous.
Tell people don't feel ridiculous because you don't want to be in my office.
Yeah,
but
totally.
And then just standing on one leg and swinging your opposite limb back and forth just to kind of warm everything up.
Yep.
And then, you can always do air squats or, if you happen to bring a band out, which I highly recommend anyone to, it's super light, super easy. Just throw a band in your bag and tie it around your knees, do some lateral banded walks. Doesn't have to be anything serious. You're not trying to build strength. You're just trying to warm up the muscles, get some blood going.
Yep. Yeah. And I see climbers all the time, and Nate, you may see this as well, but swinging their arms around a ton and doing almost nothing for their lower bodies.
Right. Yeah, and the lower body is hard because, I don't know, I feel like, as climbers, we are upper body dominant. And so it's super easy to forget the lower body. So another thing that I would suggest is getting on the wall and just kind of mimicking those moves.
Yeah.
It's in the gym, it's super easy. You can, hop in there, throw your foot on a big jug and just kind of gently rock over, not do a full heel hook or anything like that. Just kind of warm your body up for those specific movements. When it comes to upper body warming up, I don't suggest hopping on the wall right away. There's more to warming up the upper body, but we can get to that.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And Nate and I talk about, sort of trying to mimic your project a little bit while you're warming up. And that doesn't mean you have to, if your project is a something crimpy, it doesn't mean you only have to climb other crimper problems. You can find crimps on the juggy super jug warm-ups, It's totally possible, and pull on those crimps. And with heel hooks, like you're talking about, you can find heel hooks. You just have to look for them. It may not be the way you do the warm-up problem, but you can jump in there and do it regardless.
Yeah. I've actually found recently that where people tend to really mess with the hamstring a little more is when they're on a big heel, when there's a big cup for them to put their heel in, because then it's easy to get lazy. I think we were talking about this earlier. So it's easy to be lazy. You can just place the heel up there, not really think about that engagement of the hamstring, and then pull on. Whereas if you've ever used a heel hook on a moon board, you can't be lazy with a heel hook on a moon board. Right. You have to really engage. And that's that feeling of that like strong engagement of the hamstring.
Right.
That's what it should feel like, even when you're on a big jug heel hook.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you suggested today, which I thought was really important, that when you put your heel on, before you go and pull your body over it, you should sort of pre-tension it. You should engage it prior to the movement. Similar to, if any of you guys listening are, familiar with deadlifting, it's really similar to when you set up for a deadlift and you tension your core and get your whole body tense before you make the lift. You don't wait until you start to lift to create all that tension.
Exactly. And when I teach a deadlift in the clinic, like I always will have somebody pause and then I'll say set, and I want to see like a physical change in their posture before they go. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what, in your head, if you need to, just say set, and there should be some sort of engagement of that hamstring before you actually pull over onto it.
Right. So heel hook's not a passive thing.
No.
It's an active move. Your legs should be doing something, and you don't want to wait until it has to do something. You want to engage it and get it ready.
And the other thing I should say is if you throw a heel hook on and you feel like, this is probably a bad idea, any move whatsoever, I can't tell you how many times the patient has come in and they've been like, I was doing this move and I knew it was a bad idea, and then I heard a pop, and now they're here to see me.
Yeah, Nate says all the time.
Yeah, for me, I feel like most climbing injuries I've ever had, they were never really surprises. It was always something along the lines of, oh man, this hold's kind of tweaky and it feels a little weird. I guess I'll just try it one or two more times. Or something along those lines. Same thing with a weird heel hook or an odd drop knee or something like that. I feel like it's rare that they're just completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
So be aware. I think that's the main goal here in preventing the injury is make sure you're warming up those areas.
Yeah.
And they're susceptible. Yeah, don't get greedy. We're all greedy when it comes to numbers. So we love them.
And as far as like some prehab kind of things that you could be doing just, in a normal workout, not necessarily as a warm-up, but maybe in between climbing days or something like that, is like we were talking about bridging or hip thrusts. My favorite person in the world, Brett Contreras, has like all the videos and all the variations of hip thrusts, and you can see him lifting some crazy heavy weight on his pelvis if you look at his Instagram. But
and I'll link you guys to Brett Contreras in the show notes.
Guy.
So
yeah, and then deadlifting, and then if you really want to burn, I think they're called Nordic curls. Is that right? No.
Jefferson curls?
No.
You're not talking about Jefferson curls.
You you have somebody hold your ankles and then you lower your body down.
Oh, yeah. Like you're on your knees. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen these. I don't know what they're called either. I've actually tried them.
I think they're called like Nordics or Nordic hamstring. They have so many different names, but so that's...
So let's set that up, how to do that. So you're on your hands and knees, essentially. Or you're on your knees.
You're on your knees.
Straight up. Mm-hmm. You have someone hold your ankles. And
or
you
can strap in.
Or strap them down, yep. And you try to keep your body in a hollow position, in a straight position. Keep your back straight.
Exactly,
you don't want to bend forward. And you try to lower yourself down.
Yeah. So I have people do this in front of a wall and start off just like a foot from the wall.
Right.
And hands in front, protect your face.
Yeah. Because you're going to end up face on the floor.
At some point, yeah. And then as you feel comfortable and strong, then you can go ahead and lower yourself or bring yourself back. So eccentrics, especially if you've already had a hamstring injury, eccentrics are some of the best ways to rehab tendons. So that's why
eccentric meaning doing the negative.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why, deadlifts are great, but these are really working that lengthening side of the movement.
Yeah.
So since you're just working the eccentric, or since eccentrics are what are beneficial, does that mean you do the eccentric and maybe put your hands down and then push yourself back up to the starting position?
That's normally what I do. Is I'll have people. So we in our clinic it's a Pilates based kind of therapy.
Sure.
Our two other therapists, Rebecca Weichel and Marie Howell, are Pilates trained, and so we have all the different equipment. So I use the Cadillac table, if anyone knows what that is, and I'll bring one of the bars up so that somebody can grab that and then push themselves off the bar.
Gotcha.
So that they're not actually lifting themselves. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought those up too, because I've definitely struggled a little bit with finding good hamstring or glute exercises that people can do with just body weight other than the hip bridge.
Right.
And that's a really great one I had completely spaced on. So
yeah. And I even think like the hip thrust, doing those like with feet elevated. And I mean, on the road, you can find things that add weight to your pelvis. Just toss weight on your pelvis. And
a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. So
doing holds in that position. I know that I'll have patients hold for like 10 seconds and we'll do like 8 reps of that. And it's like sweating at the end, like puddles. So
yeah. Oh, good. I think that's good advice. I completely forgotten about those. And it's just a muscle we tend to neglect.
Yeah.
Unless you're a lifter.
Right.
So
I was at a conference last weekend and it was actually really interesting. I went to a hamstring, like high hamstring strain course, and it was all for NFL football players and sprinters, and so and soccer players. And it was interesting because every like mechanism of injury that they were discussing was like a lengthening injury. So like going to kick a ball or like running and then slipping with the foot outstretched. And so it's like a lengthening of the hamstring. But none was a shortening. None of it of like any sort of concentric contraction. And so I actually stood up and asked like, hey, this is my type of client. Like, does any of this change? Would any of this rehab change if you knew the mechanism of injury was on the concentric phase? And they're like, well, that injury doesn't happen.
Oh, really?
Like, well, it does, but it's with rock climbers, and they're like, oh, like and so I actually like, I'm, in a full piece or full suit, trying to explain like how a climber heel hooks and everything. And they're like, huh, we think it'd be the same. So I was like, okay, well, I think I'm on the right track. So, because all their rehab was basically, Nordic curls and hip thrust, all that good stuff.
Okay, cool. As far as we've talked about strengthening it, and when they get that injury, how can our listeners know if it's a severe injury? Should they go and see a doctor first? Should they try and self-diagnose and work on it themselves? What's your advice there?
So of the ones that I've seen, there is an audible pop.
Okay.
And usually you can walk, but it doesn't feel great to walk.
Gotcha.
And prolonged sitting is going to aggravate it. Any sort of like, probably your gait, so the way you walk is going to be a little different, just because you're not going to be able to like put your foot or the affected foot as far out in front of you, because it hurts to do that lengthening. And so as long as you're able to walk okay,
without pain.
Yeah, without pain. And like, if like the next day you're fine, then I would say, go see a PT, because then they can really tell you like, okay, have you torn it completely, or have you avulsed? So that's kind of the big thing is if you've actually torn the tendon with a little bit of bone, so the tendon attaches onto so it attaches onto the ischial tuberosity, so that's your sit bone. And if you've torn it enough to actually pull some of the bone off, that is like a non-weight bearing, you'd want to definitely see a doctor for that. But a PT should be able to diagnose you. Through special tests and different, modalities and stuff like that. They'll be able to kind of figure out like what's going on. But the unfortunate thing about it is once that injury does happen, it takes a while for it to feel good, like for you to feel confident in heel hooking.
Right.
And so for a lot of my climbers, what I'll have them doing is a lot of just like towing, or like, you know, Nate at one point had me doing a lot of one-legged climbing. And hey, if I can't get you to like quit climbing, let's do some one-legged climbing. Like,
yeah, it's a good drill anyway.
Or, you know, traversing, just trying to like, I'm never...
Keep off the heel hooks for a while.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say never, but I went to a couple PTs before I came into the field myself, and you know, I'd be like, hey, you know, this hurts, and they'd be like, oh, well, you should probably quit climbing. And like, that's like a big thing that I'm not going to tell somebody who's addicted to climbing to quit climbing, because that's their vice, and unless it's like going to be a danger to them.
Yeah. And I think, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, I may totally be off here, but I think what I tell my clients generally is, if it's a minor connective tissue injury, it's probably going to heal faster if you're using it a little bit to get blood flow to the area. Whereas if you just completely rest it and don't do anything, you're going to come back and it's just going to get injured almost immediately again.
Exactly. Exercise is the one thing that's never been proven to be bad for pain or injury or anything.
Right.
The only thing about that is, you know, I won't tell you not to climb, but I will tell you, like, let's figure out a way to modify it.
Yep, totally.
And like Nate's told me before, you know, hey, that's the time to look at technique. Like,
yep.
You know, were you throwing a lazy heel hook because you aren't great at like using toes? So let's figure out how to get some fancy footwork in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I have a couple of clients right now that came to me with hamstring issues, and both of them in their plans right now have, you know, during their warm-ups, they do some hamstring testing. Just lightly pulling on it, you know, trying to pull over with toes, trying to pull over with heels, just to see where it's at, see how it feels for the day, and then gauge where they're going from there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you should take every day the same as the last. Some days it's going to hurt a little more, some days it's going to feel a little better. And you should just ease into it each time you're back into the gym.
And if it's bad enough that I'm telling you that you probably shouldn't be climbing on it, then hey, that's the time to get on some fingerboard training. You know?
Yeah. There's lots of options.
Yeah, that's like I had a client, not a client, a patient who had a pretty significant shoulder surgery, and we did weeks of lower body stuff in addition to shoulder rehab. You know, I was like, hey, there's no reason that you can't get your legs stronger right now.
Yeah, totally. When I had my shoulder surgery, I can't tell you how many pistol squats I did.
Exactly.
You know, thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
Of them, so
I was like, hey, let's make that core solid.
Yeah, totally. So if they, you know, we know how to strengthen it a little bit, and doing eccentrics if you've had an injury and you're trying to strengthen is important, especially using the exercises we talked about. Are there myofascial things that you recommend? Are you a fan of that kind of thing?
So depending on how long somebody's had an injury, if it's been like a chronic thing where they're like, you know, I did this a year ago and it's still just kind of tweaky and not feeling great, then I'll really like dig into it using tools. That way we can kind of, it's almost like I want to recreate an inflammatory process in that case to kind of bring blood flow back to the area, see if we can clean some of that stuff
going again.
For somebody who's super acute, it kind of depends. At that point, it's more about like pain relief.
Okay.
And, you know, you might ultrasound it. Ultrasound is not my favorite thing. There's not a lot of evidence.
But see a PT.
Usually the modality kind of stuff is more for like that chronic injury.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts you have, Nate, on hip region?
Actually, I guess just one thing I'd add, and it'd be cool to have your opinion on this. One thing that I've seen that's worked fairly well with people whenever their like hamstrings are bothering them or something like that is having them switch over to trying to climb on really small footholds. And it seems a little counterintuitive because you'd think, if it's something a lot smaller, you're going to pull harder with your legs. But what ends up happening, I feel a lot of times is, if you put your foot in a jug, you can put so much weight on that large of a foothold.
Totally.
Where with small footholds, no matter how hard you may be trying, you can only put so much weight into it. But what are your thoughts on that?
That's funny. So there's a study, I think it was not too long ago, like in 2014, they actually, so my research in grad school was about foot pressure. It was actually looking at diabetic feet. And so we would put these insoles and like measure foot pressures over different like types of inserts. Okay. But there was a study using this same system. It's called the Novel-Padar system. And using the same system, they actually studied climbers and like novice climbers, people who've never climbed, which is, this is going to be like a well, duh kind of moment for most of us. But like they aren't putting a ton of pressure in their feet at all.
Right.
And it was statistically significant that the expert climbers are putting so much more pressure through their feet. And so it just goes to show that the better you are, the more you are using your feet. And so it's something to definitely focus on.
Yeah, and I think that transfers over to small feet. And I think when you're using tiny little feet and you don't get as much purchase out of it as you would on a jug, then you're more likely to use more of your core to pull you into position as opposed to just hamstring before it's ready. That's my thought, my totally unprofessional opinion here, but that's my thought on tiny feet. And for me, I know I've had a couple of heel hook issues, one on River Dance down in Chattanooga, and now that I'm having this adductor pain that's sprung up, and sprung is totally the wrong word, it's creeped up since like December, and just started getting bad. I've definitely noticed that on big feet I can hurt it much faster. If I stay on little feet, then I don't tend to hurt it very often. So
it's funny that you mentioned River Dance. I hurt my hamstring on the roof up the hill.
Oh yeah.
Lazy heel hook.
I could see that. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And it's hard to warm up there. So, and definitely when I did that, I wasn't doing any sort of movement prep prior to climbing. All my warm up was hiking in and climbing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the hike in, it's good for blood flow, but that's not enough.
Right.
A lot of people will say like, oh, well, I hiked in, I'm good, I'm warm. It's like, no.
That seemed to work for me when I was 20, and I was elastic, but it doesn't work for me now.
Now that you're 23?
Yeah, now that I'm 23, exactly. Yeah, 23 plus 20 or something like that. But I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about shoulders. Break! Hey everybody, Chris here. I'll try to keep this short and sweet. Since this thing became officially official, I've basically been obsessed. I've got dozens of episodes waiting to go out, and I'm constantly recording new conversations. I want to continue putting this level of energy into it, and you all can help. We've created a page at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast where you can help support what we're building. In return, even for as little as $1 per month, you'll get access to the brand new We Scream Like Eagles podcast, which includes tips from our guests, extra conversations about hot topics, and Q&As with your questions posed to our guests. If you think it's worth more than $1 a month, we've got other rewards available on top of the bonus episodes like stickers, ebooks, t-shirts, and training plans. So if you've been considering pitching in, now's the time. That's patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. Thanks a ton, and back to the show. Okay, we are back with Allison Stowers, and
you said it right.
I know. You corrected me today, that's why I said it right. And we never talked about where you work, so let's talk about that really quick.
So I work at Peak Fitness and Physical Therapy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you're familiar with Chattanooga at all, it's across from Cox Bakery, which has the best apple fritters in town.
Oh man, I didn't get any while we were there.
It's on Broad Street on the south side. We just moved to a bigger space because we're just continuing to grow after 5 years of being open.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and your clientele base and some climbers in there?
Yes, for sure.
So.
Yeah, actually, when I came to Chattanooga, I knew like what I wanted to do. Like I knew how I wanted my practice to be set up. And it was kind of like, well, if I don't find it, then I'm going to have to build it myself. But as luck would have it, Rebecca Weichel owns Peak. She started it 5 years ago. And a friend of mine, actually Charlie, whose trailer we're in, was like, oh, you should talk to Rebecca. They sponsored Triple Crown. And I was like, wait, what? And I'm like, turn around one of my Triple Crown t-shirts and see this like physical therapy logo like on the back of my shirt. And I was like, that's where I want to work. And bugged her enough, and here I am.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Went out there and got it.
Yeah.
And, through your practice, you see shoulder issues. That's what we talked about hips, and let's talk about shoulders. Shoulders are near and dear to my heart because I went through a pretty major shoulder surgery about 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago in April.
What kind of surgery did you have?
I had a fully torn labrum, fully torn supraspinatus, and my bicep tendon was shredded. So they ended up cutting the shredded section out and doing a bicep tenodesis.
Okay. So attached down below.
Attached to the humerus instead. And here's something I want to get your opinion on this really quick. This is a totally selfish moment here.
Do it.
But you guys will appreciate this. One of the scariest moments in my recovery for my shoulder was I was in Lander and I had been working on raising my arm up to the level where I could reach a door frame, the top of a door frame. I wasn't planning on hanging on it or anything. I just wanted to be able to raise my arm that high. Well, the first time I got to it was in the kitchen of my fiance's parents' house. And when I grabbed the door frame, I let go of the engagement. I didn't keep my shoulder engaged. I just hung my arm there. And I realized I couldn't let go. If I let go of the door frame, my arm was going to drop. I couldn't re-engage it. Mm-hmm. And my theory was that it was because it was reconnected in a different place, that bicep tendon that raises my arm. So my brain hadn't created that connection yet. And it took me weeks of really focused effort to be able to re-engage my arm if I disengaged it while it was up high. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Actually, no, I haven't. That's interesting, but it makes complete sense.
It was terrifying.
Either that or you had the concentric strength, but not the eccentric strength at that point.
Right.
To be able to do that.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. But okay, I was just curious if you'd ever heard of that before. It was like, how the hell am I going to climb if I can't ever let go of anything? I could do one move. This would be amazing. My arm's just going to
flop down all the time.
All right, so I'm done derailing.
No, that's fine. That's actually a really common surgery for climbers. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of those at Peak, and it's a long recovery. I would say, depending on skill level, I don't know. What I'm usually seeing somebody for about 4 or 5 months, maybe even 6. And it's usually, more frequent in the beginning. And then obviously it
when they've had a big surgery like this.
When they've had a big surgery like that. And so actually the patient that I mentioned earlier, we were doing our normal, you start passive range of motion and then you do active assist range of motion where you're using your other arm to help the surgical arm up. Mm-hmm. And then moving on, but at home, there's no reason that person couldn't have been doing lower body or core or anything like that.
Yeah, I worked constantly while I was laid
exactly.
back. Yeah. Well, let's back up and go back to prehab, because I think climbers put themselves in bad positions. I mean, I think that's just what we do.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How can we keep our shoulders safer? So
a lot of times, most of the time when somebody has shoulder pain or some nagging thing and they come to see me, one of the first things I want to see is them just raise their arms out to the side and in front of them with their shirt off and from behind, because scapular movement, it it's a mess with climbers.
Yeah.
They're never symmetrical, which I don't expect anybody to be perfectly symmetrical.
Sure.
But I see some crazy winging, and I call it scapular dyskinesis. It's basically when scapula's just kind of
goes rogue.
Yes, exactly. Goes rogue. And so that is a huge thing that I work on with climbers. It's trying to get middle and lower traps a lot stronger, and then translating that to the wall. So middle lower traps is what keeps your shoulder blades down and back on your like over your
on
ribs.
Your rib cage, yeah.
Exactly. And so, we'll do prone, Y's, and T's, and so that's laying over a plinth or laying over a bench or something like that, and then lifting your arm straight out to the side. Most people do these wrong because they just throw their arm up. They're like, oh, I can lift my arm all day.
Like palm down, lifting up.
Well, I usually have people just as long as
when they do it wrong.
Exactly, yeah. So palm down, thumb down.
Yeah.
Or they're just using their glenohumeral joint, so where the ball and socket of your shoulder are, that's where they're driving the movement off of.
That's what they're lifting from, yeah.
And what I always tell people is, first off, thumb up. That gets you out of an impingement position.
Mm-hmm.
And then think about bringing the shoulder blade across the back, and then the arm's just going along for the ride. If the arm lifts, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too.
So it's the shoulder blade you're moving.
Exactly.
And that's what moves the arm.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you're doing it right, the arm shouldn't raise up a ton. So,
gotcha. So it's not a flexibility thing. You're not trying to raise your arms as high as possible.
Exactly, yep. And usually when I have somebody do it right for the first time, I'll do 8 to 12 reps. And by that 12th rep, they're
it's tiring.
Shaking uncontrollably. Yeah.
It's unbelievable how we think we have really strong backs as climbers, and parts of our back is really strong, but parts of it's really weak. And the first time that I was doing those after surgery, I got really tired really fast and was blown away.
Yeah. So that, and then doing wall angels. So essentially it's the same exact muscle that we're working on, really, feet about 6 inches out from the wall, and then arms in a W position against the wall, trying to get the back flat. So you're going to roll your pelvis, tuck your tail under, and then raise the arms up along the wall and then back down. And on that down, I really have people bring their elbows as close into their body as they can, so they really feel that engagement low on their back.
Okay. And a lot of us don't have the mobility to raise our arms very high. What happens then? And
that's fine. Usually you can work into it. So if, I don't know, the goal of the exercise is really working on, for me, a lot of times it's just getting that lower trap, middle trap engagement on the pull down. If somebody is having a really hard time keeping their wrists on the wall, so as they go up, then they go into this internal rotation moment,
right?
Which I do see a lot of.
Yep.
Then we'll kind of work more on flexibility of this external rotation.
Getting the external rotation.
So laying over a foam roller in that W position.
Right.
And then, so if they can't do it on the wall, let's do it on a mat over a foam roller.
Okay.
And work there first.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to know. I'm glad you said that it's more about pulling down and keeping those muscles engaged rather than just lifting your arms as high as you can.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. I think a lot of people misunderstand those exercises quite a bit.
Yeah.
They watch a video and see the motion and they're like, oh, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
They don't understand the point of it. So.
Yeah, and for climbers, you're talking about being strong, and we think our backs are strong, and it tends to be upper traps. You know, we're so upper trap dominant, and then we're rounded in the shoulders.
Yep.
And if you think about that, if you're going to round in your shoulders, your pecs are going to be tight. So pecs are the muscles on the front of your arms. And then that means that the muscles that are in between your shoulder blades, they're going to have to lengthen to compensate for the shortness on the front. So what I need people to do in order to, make up for that, and is to get into this, upright kind of posture. And that's really hard for climbers to be reminded to stay in this all day.
Totally. Should we be stretching our pecs at all, or?
Yes and no. I don't say don't dig in there, because, we're shortened for a reason. This is where part of our strength comes in, but there needs to be some sort of balance. So I get on a foam roller after your workout and just kind of lay. You can do some of the arm movements and stuff, but just trying to work on opening up.
Yep. And when we say lay on a foam roller, you mean lay your spine down the length of a foam roller so it opens your chest up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you need more thoracic mobility, you can always go long ways and then kind of stretch back over it. But specifically for what I'm talking about is long ways along your spine and then open the arms up.
Yep.
And then you can actually take that into a scapular exercise. So arms straight up in front of you. You're laying long ways on a foam roller and just bringing one arm out by your side. So like horizontal abduction. Yes, like a T. Bring your arm out to the side and just do one arm at a time. And think about, as you go down, squeezing the foam roller with your shoulder blade, and then try it with the other side and see if see if you can feel any sort of difference. And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I'm not feeling I don't feel like I'm able to squeeze as hard. And I feel like having the foam roller underneath sometimes gives people that tactile input.
Sure.
Oh, that's what you're wanting me to engage.
Right. Good idea. Yeah. And I like doing it one arm at a time. I hadn't ever thought about that. And I was wondering why when you were saying it, but it totally makes sense to be able to compare the two in isolation. So,
and back to the Y's and the T's, I only have people do one arm at a time there because it's really easy to just go to town and think that you're doing both sides the same when you're actually not.
Yep. So. Yeah, totally. I've definitely found that in these guys, I was doing some shoulder dislocate type stuff the other night, and these guys were pointing out that my right shoulder was shrugging up, and that's the shoulder I had surgery on.
Yeah.
It was shrugging up more than the other.
Yeah.
And I hadn't paid much attention to that in a while. That was something I really worked on hard shortly after surgery, but I hadn't thought much about it since then. So.
Yeah, that's huge for climbers. With every exercise that I give them is that they'll come up into this, shrug, upper trap,
shoulders
dominant kind of thing.
Ears,
yeah, exactly. That if you end up in my clinic, you will hear me say at some point, don't let your shoulder talk to your ear.
Yep.
If that's happening, you're doing it wrong.
Cool. And Nate, your thoughts on any of this so far?
Yeah, a couple different things. One, so with exercises like this and just exercise like shoulder exercises in general, you'll see people, walk into the gym or out at the crag and they just do 1,000 band exercises of all different. They all look about the same, but with different types of form. Are there any good sources that you like for maybe
question.
Videos or descriptions on good form?
So, and you're going to have to help me with last name. Ann Raber, yes, has a great video. If you just Google her name, Ann Raber warm-up video.
It's the Rest Day Shoulder Solution or something like that. I actually just talked the other day with her about that.
Oh my gosh. She's got I haven't created a video for warming up or any. I had a little one, and then I ended up finding her video and was like, well, I'm never going to do another one. I'm just going to send people here because it's so good. But yeah, I do probably about half of what she has posted on that video before I climb.
Nice.
Okay, cool. We'll post that video up on the site too. I'll check with Anna, make sure that's okay, but we'll post that video up on the
it's super good
page.
But one thing I was going to say, you're asking, you were kind of making a motion of internal and external rotation. So that is another exercise that for climbers, a lot of, if you want to warm up and do internal, external rotation, great. If you have shoulder pain and you're trying to work on things, just do external rotation. Don't do internal rotation because we're all strong here. We're all strong on this internal rotation part. I don't need you to get any stronger pulling in. I need you to get stronger pulling out. So what I'm basically doing is my arm is lifted up to 90 degrees, and then I'm pulling a band or a weight or something up.
And up and towards your back.
So like the opposite of pitching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The opposite of pitching, the wind up.
Yes.
And I always have climbers do it at 90 degrees if they're able, because that's where we work. We don't, a lot of times if you've had PT before and you go to kind of, a mill kind of place, you'll just get the towel under the arm and you'll do it at your side, but that's not where climbers are. Yeah. We're up shoulder height or above.
Yep, specificity.
Yep.
So your upper arm would be parallel to the ground.
Exactly.
And out to your side.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question. I like that. The bands are so ubiquitous. I see everyone with them doing all sorts of crazy things. So
hey, and I'm okay with people doing all sorts of crazy things as long as they're out there doing something.
Yeah, but if we have a smarter solution that you can do, why not do it?
For sure.
So, okay, cool. And what shoulder injuries do you see most often?
Most often I see like rotator cuff tendinopathies.
Rotor cups.
If you're from my part of town. Which I was saying that most of my climbers know what their rotator cuff is, and they actually say it correctly. But my grandma will still call it her. She called me the other day, my rotors are all broken. I'm like, all right, Grandma. At 86, I'm glad you still got some. So I see a lot of rotator cuff tendinopathies, and there's a difference in tendinitis and tendinosis, and then I say tendinopathy because it's basically
just a
catch-all
injury, right?
So tendinitis is basically like you felt something happen, and it happened yesterday, or it happened in the last week. Tendinosis is, you've been dealing with this for the past 10 years and you still haven't addressed it.
My elbows.
Yes, exactly.
Nate's elbows,
yeah. And so most of the time, rotator cuff stuff is happening because of overuse, or, not warming up properly, or, I'm grabbing this Gaston and it doesn't feel great, and I'm going to keep pulling really hard on it, and one go is one too many.
Yeah.
So I think I had mentioned at one of the workshops, it may have been the one you're at, I'm not sure, but like if you look at climbers and it's like, what can I do to prevent getting injured? The number one thing you can do to prevent getting injured is to actually quit climbing, because it's kind of an exposure thing. It's just like, teenage girls playing soccer. What's the number one predictor of tearing your ACL as a young girl playing soccer?
Yeah.
Playing soccer.
Yeah.
Totally. And the more exposure you have, the more times you're out on the field. And that's why I love Eric Horst and how he is like, he's got his boys in football part of the year. He's got his boys climbing the other part of the year,
and they're little badasses.
It's okay to take time off and, do other things.
Yep. Yeah. They could probably be better climbers or more well-known climbers if they did it all the time, but they're going to be better athletes in the long run by taking the approach that Eric is, and they're going to be healthier.
Yeah. So most of the time with shoulder injuries, what I see is just like, going too hard, going 8 days on, Nate.
Wouldn't know what you're talking about.
But every now and again, and I, without MR vision, which I still have yet to invent, I can't really like
idea,
I know, right? If somebody comes in and has some shoulder injury or like some kind of tendon-y type stuff, I can't really say like specifically or how bad the tear is or anything like that, but what we can do is go through some rehab stuff. And if you respond, great. And if it's getting worse, then that's when it's a referral. And that's the great thing about, I mentioned earlier, direct access. We have it in Tennessee. We have it in most states. So you can go directly to a physical therapist without having to have a referral from an MD.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And at this point, most PTs are educated at the doctoral level. So we do know those things like, okay, does this need to go for an MRI?
Right.
Does this need to go for further screening? I mean, it's you never want to have that patient that you're like, oh man, I'm sorry, but you're going to need to go get an MRI. But in the end, it usually is not that serious and ends up being cheaper coming to us.
Yeah. And here's a question for you. The answer to this might just be trust your instincts, but not everyone has good instincts, so I thought I'd ask the question. When the event happened that my shoulder got injured, I knew something was wrong. I'd had trouble with it because of working overhead for years, but on certain jobs it would get worse and worse, and then other times it would be totally fine. And when this event happened, I went to a doctor, just a normal general practitioner. She told me it was probably just tendonitis. I said, no way, I need to go see a specialist. I went to the specialist. He ran me through all their little strength tests, resistance tests, and because I had learned to compensate so well for it over time, all the resistance tests showed that I just had tendonitis. And he told me that, and I said, no way, that there's something majorly wrong. Mm-hmm. I need an MRI. And after I got the MRI, he said, well, your shoulder's totally fucked up. You need to come in and get surgery. So, what do we do in that case that we know something is wrong, or we believe something is wrong, but the doctor tells us otherwise?
I think at that point you really have to be an advocate for yourself. Mm-hmm. I always tell patients they know their body better than I do. And if you feel like something is seriously wrong, like find an outpatient center where you can just say, hey, I want an MRI.
Yep.
Use it judiciously though, because MRIs are expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, not in your case necessarily, but a lot of times these shoulder injuries can be rehabbed. So
right.
like you could have a slap tear and
mm-hmm.
and even if it hurts, you could do PT and still climb.
Right. Yeah.
No surgery
lots
needed.
of people have them without even knowing that.
Exactly.
Have them, right?
Yeah, and that's what is kind of the issue with getting a little diagnostic happy. Is that with if somebody gets an MRI of their back and they find that they have a bulging disc, then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I have a bulging disc, and it's like that pain can almost seem so much worse,
right,
than if they had never gotten the MRI in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a history of being a hypochondriac, maybe don't go to the doctor to get an MRI.
No.
And you know who you are out there.
My mother listening to this. Yeah, exactly.
So, as far as, once you feel like you've injured your shoulder, and it's so funny, I meet more and more and more climbers who tell me they have a shoulder issue. Like, I never heard anyone say that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But now that there's all this vocabulary about it, mm-hmm. that there's all this discussion about shoulder injuries, all of a sudden everyone has a shoulder injury.
Yeah.
What do we do from there? Is it the same similar stuff we do as far as warming up and prehabbing? Should we be strengthening in some other way? What's the thought if we think we have a minor injury?
Yeah, so minor injury, definitely like listening to your body as you're climbing. Mm-hmm. So I like tons of people tell me like, oh yeah, like I've got this like right here on the front of my arm, and they'll like point right to their biceps and then like, yeah, it's a little tweaky. And then they climb and they're like, oh man, like now it's really screaming at me.
Right.
So, if you've got something little, like take some, if you need to, take a day off. Yep. It's not going to kill you to take a day off.
Rest is pretty important.
Right. Hydration, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then, making sure that you are doing your warm-ups. And, any sort of it's hard to say like specific exercises without knowing like what somebody's specific weaknesses are. But anything that you can do to bring your shoulder blades down and back, I bring everything back to the scapula. So even like climbing, like I'll have people, once I know that they're engaging middle and lower traps, I'll have them get on the wall and actually climb with their shoulder blades pulled down and back, so that they're climbing more with their back and their core and less like pulling on their shoulders. So,
and you're not advocating that they perform that way, that they're just training themselves to learn to pull that
it'd be
way.
like a training. It's like, Nate has me doing rooting, and while I probably should be doing it more on the wall, I'm not necessarily thinking about rooting all the time. But same with
sometimes if you practice enough, it'll click.
Exactly. It kind of translates.
Be like, oh, look at that. I just did that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like the other thing is like I see a ton of injuries come in because of like dead pointing and then sagging into their shoulders.
Right, not staying engaged.
Exactly. And so it's just like the hamstring thing, you've got to stay like, keep your shoulder blades, keep your delts, keep everything like, bam, like as engaged as you can. It's the second that you get lazy and sag, that's when things start to tear.
Yep. And I was never very aware of that until after my surgery, because coming back from it, I was really hesitant to do any sort of dynamic move to my right side. But, I apply the same principles we do in training generally to that, and I practiced it, in small amounts and, little dynamic moves, and built up and built up. And the first time I did one and got a little lazy, it hurt like hell.
Yeah.
So now I've gotten much better through practice at measuring whether I'm going to be able to stay in control or not. And then I can make the decision, am I willing to risk what the consequences might be by going out of control.
Yeah. It all goes back to that. Is your shoulder talking to your ear?
Right.
I see it a lot of times on the campus board.
I was just about to say the campus board.
Yeah. I see so many shoulders talking to ears on the campus board. And that's, one place that people injure themselves early on very quickly. New climber, wow, this looks really cool. Like, let's do this. Like, I mean, I know that I've like tweaked fingers on the campus board, but
I see the Instagram videos of people campusing, and their shoulders, they just sag down onto their tendons.
Yeah.
I'm like
hangboarding too. Like hangboarding is about finger strength. It's so, but it's still like, I still need your elbows a little bit, not bent, but like at least engaged, and I need your shoulder blades pulled down and back. And that actually, there's one other exercise that once you're kind of climbing engaged, there's an exercise you can actually do on a hangboard. So you you're on a hangboard and you kind of pull yourself up into a diagonal, almost like you're about to go into
front lever.
Yes, into a front lever.
But just your upper body, your torso goes into that position.
It's almost like your torso goes into that position, and you're kind of, it's like you're pushing your body away from the board, and if you think about what your back is doing, it's like your shoulder blades are pulling down against your rib cage.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, totally.
So, and there's a link I can send you for that too.
So is it similar to like a scapular pull-up?
Yes. It is. Except with most of the time with scapular pull-ups, you're like straight, you're pulling straight down. And this, you're almost like you're pulling down, and like it's like you're pushing the board away from you.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, shoot me that link and I'll put it in there too.
Yeah. So that is one that like once I see somebody do it in the clinic and I'm like, yeah, okay, that looks good. That is something I want you doing before you even touch the wall. Okay. You've done your arm circles, you've done your wacky throwing your arms around and everything else. And then I want you to do that on the hangboard.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have them do that just so that they get it in their brains to engage that position?
Exactly.
Is that what we're looking for?
Exactly. It's strengthening, but it's also like a little muscle memory, like, okay, this is how we're going to climb.
Kind of building that awareness of what things should feel like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go through that with a lot of movements. If I'm warming up right.
Yeah.
And even out here, out in Waco, that's what I've been doing. I find holds that I can do some scapular pull-ups on, and I do scap push-ups just to so I can feel my scaps moving and being engaged, and then I do the same thing with my legs.
Yeah.
More so now than I was a month ago, but
Yeah, and then a lot of times I'll tell climbers, for the first 10 minutes of your climbing, climb slow and think of it almost as like yoga on the wall. Like you're going to climb slow and really pay attention to what your body is feeling like and paying attention to what muscles are engaging. And a lot of times I'll watch people, I'll have patients that then I see, at TBA, and I'm like, that's not slow. So if you're from Chattanooga and you've ever seen Andy Cutler climb, I call it Cutler climbing. So I want you to spend 10 minutes doing Cutler climbing.
Okay.
So climbing as slow as possible.
I spend 100% of my climbing that way. So,
do you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, I've been sort of practicing the other way, learning to stay engaged while moving dynamically and getting more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But because I'm a slow climber, that's how I always start out. So. Thoughts, Nate?
Yeah. So one thing, as someone who's had to kind of retrain how I climb.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me go ahead and say that, and I'm gonna totally cut you off after I just brought you in. But I think that's something you're really good at, is you've regressed a lot of your movements and retrained them. So
it's a good way of saying I've gotten worse.
Well, not exactly, but you said it. I didn't.
No. So I hit a point to where I was just always injured. I had a ton of problems, shoulders especially. And for me, I had to, it's like 2 steps back, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. But this is more like 50 steps back before I could even start moving forward. Because, I was really strong climbing with my elbows chicken winged and like shoulders talking to my ears, like, because I just did that forever. And I was really good at compensating that way. And so for me, it was really hard to kind of bite the bullet and say, okay, I need to like completely strip down the way I climb and rebuild it. Is that a conversation you ever have to have with people?
Yeah. Yes. So much. I have a patient right now that I did my whole, take off your shirt, let's see how the scapulars are moving. And it's like, oh man, like you can't climb like this.
Can you have someone drive you home?
Not that bad, although that's happened.
Oh no.
But no, it's, so, okay, we have to figure this out. Like we need to get this moving before you're going to get on the wall. Like, and that's really hard to tell a climber. But it's also, once I like work with the climber for long enough, doing the right exercises, getting the right muscles engaged, and then all of a sudden it's like they're climbing, they're back to climbing, and then they're climbing stronger than they were before. Then that's usually pretty telling.
And while healthy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the climbers that's happened to are my biggest advocates. Those are the people that are out there like shouting from the rooftops and coming out here and climbing and crushing. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool, and it's cool to be building that.
Yeah.
So I'm stoked for it, and I'm stoked for you. I've heard that, Paul's told me all sorts of good things. Nate's told me all sorts of good things. And I'm psyched that the Chattanooga climbing community is, welcoming it and latching on like they should.
Nate and Paul are getting their like talons into me. I'm training with Nate right now, and Paul has this Strong First competition coming up that he wants me to do.
You're going to do it?
I was planning on it, and then the whole kidney stone thing happened, so...
yeah. Likely excuse.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I spent a week curled in fetal position rolling around, so...
so horrible.
It was the worst. So
Well,
I don't recommend kidney stones for anyone out there.
Now you're in Waco curling up in the fetal position.
No, I haven't. It's been great out here.
Good.
Yeah. No, it was honestly like, I think that I passed the kidney stone like 24 hours before I got to El Paso.
Oh,
because it was
really?
like I was in pain for 6 days, like ER visit, everything, and then
that was right before you came here?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like I was in the ER in Chattanooga for 13 hours. Like
and then
IV,
in your car for 20.
Percocet. No, because I did fly. I flew to San Antonio. I had a physical therapy conference last week.
Oh, nice. That's good.
It was like rolling around.
Oh, God.
I was on like every 4 hours Percocet or hydrocodone and was still having pain.
And then that's the worst.
I just woke up one morning and there was no more pain.
You're like, let's go bouldering.
Yeah, like 13 hours later, we're in Waco and let's go climb. So it worked out.
Awesome. Any thoughts from you? Anything you want to put out there to climbers?
The only other thing I wanted to mention about upper extremity is like if you think you have a shoulder injury and it's like a nagging thing, don't be surprised if your PT or trainer or whoever you seek out starts looking at your elbow or your hand or your neck or something, because all of that can be super, intertwined.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It is all connected, and there's a lot of times that I'll have somebody, turn their head left, turn their head right, and it's such a difference. It's like, okay, that's where the shoulder pain's actually coming from. So let's work here first.
Yeah. So trust your practitioner.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks for sitting down with us. I was, when I first mentioned this to Allison, she was like, can I think about it? So I was a little surprised today when you were like, what time are we doing it?
Yeah. So. As long as I don't have to like hear myself, I'm not sure that I'm going to listen to this afterwards.
Okay. Well, you don't have to.
Chipmunky.
I'm glad we have it.
Okay.
So
cool.
Well, yeah. Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't know if you guys have noticed a trend here, but I really like talking to people who can take science, can understand it, and can then relate it in a really human way, because, I think that's just more effective for the large majority of people. So I really appreciate that that's what Allison is able to bring to the table. Going to a doctor or to a physical therapist can be a little intimidating because we don't want to be told that we've been doing things wrong and that we've screwed ourselves up. But, going to see someone like Allison is more like talking to one of your climbing partners who just happens to really understand what you're talking about. I suggest you guys reach out to physical therapists if you have any issues that you need worked on to begin with. If you happen to be in the Chattanooga area, definitely go see Allison at Peak Fitness. All those ladies over there are athletes and climbers, and I think that's a really good resource for you. And, speaking of resources, that's something else that I admire about Allison is when I asked her what links she wanted included on the website, she sent me a couple of other PTs, 3 other PTs who are doing good work, and said, these are people who are putting out great information, and she wants those included as well. So you can check out her recommendations, the people who she follows, on powercompanyclimbing.com on the blog post for this podcast, where we'll also have links to the videos and some of the exercises that she mentions, like the Nordic curl. You can also find Allison at chatclimberpt.com. You can also find her at peakfitnessandpt.com. I'll have links to those on the website as well. And one more time, if you happen to be in Missouri, August 13th and 14th, we're going to be in Kansas City at Rock Climbing Gym. August 15th and 16th, we'll see you at Climb So Ill, St. Louis. August 18th and 19th at Zenith Climbing Center. And August 20th and 21st, we are back at Rock, Kansas City. And August 25th, 26th, 27th, you can find us in Boise, Idaho at Asana Climbing Gym. So if you're in those areas, please come out and see us. We would love to work with you guys, get to know you guys. So hope to see you there. I think you guys know where to find us. We've been doing this for a while. You've been with us for a while. 52 episodes to be exact. And you can find us elsewheres on the Instagrams at Power Company Climbing. You can find us on the Pinterest at Power Company Climbing. You get the gist here. This is simple. Facebook, we're looking for 3,000 likes, 3,000 followers on our business page at Power Company Climbing. And the Twitter, no, you can't find us on the Twitter because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time,